want to thank everyone for tuning in. I've been listening through the afternoon of panels, and I heard Scott Snyder talking about what libraries meant to him earlier on and working in libraries. It seems to me that I did write some of either Nosferatu or the firemen in the Boston Public Library. And I find myself writing about libraries quite a bit. I had a heroic librarian in Nosferatu named Maggie Lee, who I think about all the time. And I did a story in the last book, the last collection, Full Throttle, about bookmobiles, and how much they've meant to so many people.
Yes, I loved the character of Maggie so much. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Upward, you're good.
Wonderful. Yes, sorry, I just can't resist just saying that Maggie is great, and I really loved the story also, Late Returns, right? In Full Throttle.
Late Returns. Yeah. Late Returns is a story, this is off topic, but Late Returns is the story of a guy who loses his parents and his job as a truck driver pretty much in one fell swoop, and comes back to his moderately small town. It's not that small, but a moderately small town to pick up the pieces and clean up, what's left over from his parents' lives, to sort of sell the house and everything. And he needs some kind of working gig and picks up a job with his town's bookmobile, which delivers books to outlying districts, and soon discovers that sometimes ghosts turn up at the bookmobile, people who were passionate readers from an earlier era who've come back for one more good read. And that this is known, that people in the library know, in fact, that driving the bookmobile means occasionally meeting the ghost that they call Late Returns. So probably my favorite story in the book is in the last collection.
Well, it is a tremendous story, although I have to say that my favorite story was probably Fawn, but
Oh, hey, thank you. Well, I like to say that one is Fawn for the whole family. Oh God, should I leave now? I'm so sorry.
No, please don't. Please don't. Let's switch it up a little bit. We're going to be talking about Lock and Key, which
let's talk about Lock and Key,
which has been renewed for a second season. But let's dive right into talking about the comic book. The first thing I'd really like to know is, what was your experience like working on Lock and Key: The Golden Age?
So The Golden Age is the next book in the series, and is the first one that doesn't tell. So the original 6 books of Lock and Key tell a single overarching story set in mostly in the modern day. And it's about a family after a tragedy coming to the family manse, the old estate that they inherited, Key House, in Lovecraft, Massachusetts. And they aren't there for long before they discover the house is full of impossible keys, reality-bending keys. Every key unlocks a different door and activates a different supernatural power. So there's a key that will allow your ghost to walk free of your body. There is a key that operates a music box that can enslave minds when it begins to play. There is a key, the Anywhere key. You can put it into a door and think about where you want to go and open the door and step out thousands of miles away. So it's sort of like teleportation. And there's one key, of course, that opens the door that should never be opened. Of course, there is a big bad, a person named Dodge, who wants that key. And the first 6 books told the story of that struggle between the Locke family and Dodge. The Golden Age is something different. The Golden Age is a standalone book set at the beginning of the 20th century. And it's about an earlier age in the history of the Locke family, an age when adults could see the magic and use it as well. And it begins in the months just before Titanic is due to set sail, and ends about 10 years after World War I. And in between stacks up quite a bit of family tragedy. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking, the first story in the book, the oldest story in the book, was published in 2011 in the fall, and as a single issue, as a standalone comic book. And the final chapter of the book will be published this fall, 10 years, almost exactly a decade after that first one was published. So Gabriel, my collaborator, the artist Gabriel Rodriguez, and I have been working on this book for a decade of our lives, which is kind of amazing.
That is awesome to hear, and it also effortlessly, I must commend you, segues into the next question, which is going to be, could you talk a little bit about the collaborative process with Gabriel Rodriguez?
Yeah, Gabe is like my he's like my soul brother. We started working together in 2007 on that very first issue of Lock and Key. What happened was I brought my pitch to IDW Comics, and the editor there, Chris Ryle, showed me some different artists. They decided they wanted to go for it. Part of the reason they agreed to go for it was because I told them I could tell the whole story in 6 issues. And I was in about 6 months and 6 issues, I was only off by about 11 years and 31 issues. So pretty close. But Chris sent me some samples of different artists, and several of them could draw incredible anatomy, and could really depict, flying gore. But I was fascinated with the work of this Chilean artist, Gabriel Rodriguez, because his characters were so warm and lovable. They had so much emotional life in their faces. They had the glow of humor and curiosity in their eyes. And it spoke to my own feeling about horror fiction and scary fiction. There is a misunderstanding that horror is about throwing a bunch of viscera at the reader, and somehow that's scary. It implies that horror is about sadism, and I don't think that's true. Maybe that's the impetus behind bad horror fiction, but I think good horror fiction is about empathy and compassion. It's about giving you some characters to love, and you fall for them and you care about them, and then you see them backed into a corner and forced to deal with the worst that life can dish out at us. And you're there with them in the darkness, and you're rooting for them. You're rooting for them to get through it. And this is how horror serves us as readers, because you may never face a vampire, or a psychopath with a mask made out of human skin and a chainsaw in one hand. But most of us do have some dark hours of the soul, when a loved one is really sick, or you received a bad diagnosis yourself, or you wake up one day and find out Donald Trump was elected president. These are scary things to happen in a human life, and horror fiction does help you think about, how am I going to deal with this? What kind of person do I want to be in these moments? How will I adapt to the fear I'm feeling now? And I think that that's a positive, that's suggests that horror fiction is actually useful to us. And as a guy who's written a lot of it, naturally, I would love that idea.
Well, that's awesome. And I definitely got to agree with you on that one about the relevancy of horror and the importance of it.
If I could, I also wanted to circle back for a second, because I sort of got a little off topic, which is that we wound up hiring Gabriel Rodriguez to do the comic. It turned out that he's just packed with extraordinary ideas and a tremendous ability to show nuance in the emotional lives of our characters. I've learned we are full collaborators. It's not my story and he draws it. It's our story and we figured it out together. I've learned as much about the characters in these books from the way Gabe draws them as he's ever learned from anything I've written about him in scripts. And I just can't imagine a better, more fulfilling collaboration. And I would also include Chris Ryle, who edits them, and Jay Photos, who's colored them. Writing is a lonely business. It's very isolating. You spend a lot of time listening to the voices in your head. Working on the comic is the closest I'll ever get to knowing what it must be like to be in a rock band for a living, and to be able to feed off the energy and creativity and excitement, of the guys on stage with you. So I got lucky the day we signed Gabe to do the comic.
Delightful. My next question is the Golden Age. As you've said, the Golden Age provides a glimpse into the lives of the Locks pre the initial 6 installments, and I'm just wondering, for the newcomers, would you be able to share a little bit about this extraordinary family?
So the Locke family has had possession of Key House in Lovecraft, Massachusetts, since before the Revolutionary War. And deep beneath the house is a cave, the Drowning Cave. And in that cave, there's a thin spot between our world and another world, a cruel, barbaric world filled with something, malevolent spirits that, for lack of a better word, we can call demons. The demons are very much drawn to our world. But they can only survive in our world by possessing a human body. They have to leap pretty quickly from their world into, some hapless human being standing on the other side of this barrier. If they don't, they fly at our world like a moth drawn to flame, and upon entering our world, they're transmuted into this reality-bending metal, the Whispering Iron. And all the keys in Key House have been forged from this iron, which can pick the locks of reality itself. And so the Locke family has had the responsibility of looking after these keys for centuries now. And in the Golden Age, we meet Chamberlain Locke and his brood. Chamberlain is an enlightened and optimistic early 20th century figure. There's something a little Bradbury-esque about his creativity and his hopefulness. He believes that the 20th century will be an era of big ideas, big dreams. Clearly, man is reaching a stage when he will put war aside forever, and learn to live peacefully in harmony with one another. Of course, it turns out Chamberlain actually has a pretty bad call on what the 20th century is going to be like. He has a son who is too young to fight, who absconds with some of the keys to fight in World War I, where some of the horrors of the keys are capable of unlocking some really horrific possibilities, but they have almost nothing on the use of chlorine gas in the battlefields of Ypres, and so there is a visit abroad to the worst hours and days of World War I, and then there's this other part of the book, which is the crazy final 2 chapters of the book, which almost requires that's almost like a separate conversation. Gabriel and I were very inspired by the work of Neil Gaiman and his groundbreaking fantasy comic book series, Sandman, Sandman is really the Sergeant Pepper of the comic book world. It is the Lord of the Rings of comic books. And Gabe and I sort of figured out how to tell the story in Lock and Key from our reading of Sandman. Neil Gaiman and his many, brilliant collaborators taught us what was possible. And we had an idea years ago that it would be amusing to send the Locke family to the hell that is glimpsed in the pages of Sandman. And I even had a reason for it. there is in the Sandman comics, there is a key that opens the gates of hell, a massive key that Lucifer carries with him everywhere. And if you have that key, you have all the rights of a sovereign in hell. And I thought, what if that key is made out of whispering iron, like all the other keys in Lock and Key? And when I posed the idea to Neil Gaiman, he said, why not? And so hopefully the Golden Age builds and builds through a series of increasingly fraught episodes in the early part of the 20th century. But ultimately, it takes one of our heroes, our heroine, Mary Locke, into the world of Sandman. It's our first time we've ever done that. That ultimately, that huge geek, thrill, the comic book crossover. So we Gabe and I have always wanted to do all the weird stuff that comics makes possible. We did a comic that was like, in the form of gag strips like Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes. We did a comic that was all full page illustrations. If it looked fun, we've always wanted to do it. And there's this long tradition of, dorky comic book crossovers, and we wanted to do one. Neil said yes, and so we wound up taking, mashing the world of Lock and Key up with the world of Sandman, and it turns out the two go together pretty naturally. It's like chocolate and peanut butter.
Well, I'm allergic to peanut butter, but that sounds great. That still sounds.
I'm not, and you just made me hungry. I have to say, we have had some, Isaiah, I'll give you a chance to say a few more things to Joe, but I wanted to just jump in and say that people are loving your description of Sandman. And I just wanted to reiterate from what you were just saying, how much we appreciate how collaborative graphic novels are. They're just so fun to hear who has actually given input on a project. It's just so amazing to us. And
I'm very grateful to Neil for giving us the thumbs up and saying go for it.
Yeah,
and not
I love
only
that,
but also reading scripts, and giving advice. He saved us from a couple dire screw ups. There were a couple key mistakes. He caught one mistake where I had made a mistake about something in Sandman that was an important fix. Later, he caught a historical goof. And of course, Neil is a walking encyclopedia of story and history and myth. And it was just a tremendous resource to have while we were working on the end of the Golden Age.
This is so fun. I will let you know that a lot of the librarians are saying they use the Lock and Key series, the Netflix series, as their gateway to introduce graphic novels to readers, which makes them want to read more. So from our perspective, that is the best thing we can hear. So Joe, we appreciate all you do. You do a lot of different things, and this is just such a fun project. And this
thank you.
Really fun. Isaiah, do you want to ask any other questions before we move on?
Yes, thank you. I'd be very interested to hear how the graphic novel writing process differs from the more traditional novel writing format.
It's a lot more fun, and that's why I try not to do too much of it, because I worry that it would become too easy for me to just give up writing novels and short stories altogether and just do comic books full time. It does vary a little bit. I have also done a line of graphic novels with DC called The Hill House. The Hill House, and under the Hill House imprint, I did a graphic novel called Basket Full of Heads. I did another one called Plunge. And then I worked with some fabulous writers and artists on some additional books. And so every project is really different. At this point, when I'm working on a comic, I'm really writing a letter about it, an extended letter about it to my friends, to Gabe and to Chris. We all share a kind of unspoken language at this point. We can anticipate. We know what the other person is thinking. We get their jokes. I heard a thing about the Coen brothers once making a movie. And the two of them, they filmed a shot. And Joel looked at Ethan and said, hey, do you think? And Ethan said, yeah, I got it. And I just thought, that's so funny, because nothing was said and everything was said. There is something that comes right up to the edge of, telepathy. that you can get when when you're in a really good, trusting, collaborative relationship. And we've had that with Lock and Key.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Isaiah.
It sounds amazing, and thank you for reminding me. I need to get to A Basket Full of Heads. That's been on my TBR pile for quite some time.
It's extremely tasteful. It's really a study. That book is really a study in good taste.
I don't doubt it.
Maybe not for, note to librarians, maybe not for your real young adult readers. Pretty R-rated business.
Well, our job is to make everyone's TBR piles longer and longer. So we're glad we did that today, even for you, Isaiah. See, we gotcha.
One more thing I'd like to ask. This is a question that Sue asked Scott Snyder, and as soon as I heard that question, I thought I got to steal it if they'll let me. But is there anything? What titles coming out later this year are you most excited about?
Well, I'm not. I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I knew I was going to have to give an unsatisfying answer, because my comic book reading lags about 2 years behind everyone else. So I'm just getting to the Immortal Hulk, which I have heard described as being a superhero story with horror elements that has some of the same sweep and power as Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing. Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing is one of my all-time favorite long-running comics, so I'm eager to get to that. There's a Wonder Woman hardcover called Wonder Woman Dead World, and I very much want to read that. It looks beautiful. And then Scott mentioned his buddy James Tynion. James Tynion did, I'm going to blow the title, Something Killing the Children? Something's Killing the Children, or Something Scaring the Children?
Somebody just requested that. Somebody just suggested you read that in the chat as you were saying it. Yeah.
Is it Something Scaring the Children?
Something is killing the children.
Something's Killing the Children, and that's on the TBR pile, and is one that I'm really, really eager to read. But as you can see, my comic book reading is still stuck back in 2017. I've got some catching up to do. I'm always lagging behind.
Well, on a call with mostly librarians, there's nothing wrong with backlist, right?
That's right. And on the subject of backlist, the folks at IDW will throw rotten vegetables at me if I forget to mention that we're just releasing now the Lock and Key Compendium, which is maybe worth taking note of. The Lock and Key Compendium is definitely the biggest book I've ever published. It collects all 6 books of the Lock and Key series between 2 covers. It's like 950 pages or something. It would break your foot if you dropped it, if you dropped it on your toes. It is just absolutely massive. Hang on a second. Hang on, I'll get you a copy.
You need a visual for this. I love it.
Yeah, this thing thing is an absolute, an absolute beast. And that's just out, and it is an opportunity to get all of it in one place, as opposed to getting all of it spread across 6. And if you have this in your bag, if you have this in your messenger bag, and someone leaps out of an alley at you, one swat, he's got a shattered cranium. So it is
so practical.
Excellent reading, but also fine for self-defense.
Well, on that note, you have just piqued a lot of interest with that book, in a lot of ways, actually. So we thank you so much for being here today with us, Joe. You are so fun, and we could talk to you all day, but we know people have to get back to work or back to doing whatever they're doing. And Isaiah, thank you for doing this interview with us. It was so fun. And like I said before, and I know you can see what I mean, the LibraryCons are so fun. The collaborative efforts that you guys put into these books are just, it amazes everybody. It's inspiring. And certainly when we ever get back to the real world, we will definitely continue with LockeCon live, but in person. But until then, we will keep making you guys do this because we love talking about graphic novels. It's so fun.
I had a wonderful time. Thank you so much.
Oh,